In this video, we're going to introduce macros for making visualizations both interactive and automated. So what is a macro? A macro is a small program that can automate repetitive or difficult tasks. They can be coded from scratch, but Excel comes with a built-in macro recorder where you can record yourself going through certain steps and then just play it back. That's the approach we're going to take. Now, what Rowan wants to do is add one last conditional format to this spreadsheet, but he wants to be able to select a state or territory by clicking in the map and then have the core waste data for that territory highlight. So let's start by doing the conditional format. And this is a bit different because we're adding a conditional format to an entire row. So we're going to select our data and come up to conditional formatting. And we're going to need to come to New Rule because we need a formula for this. And then we're going to click in the bar where we enter our formula and we're going to type our equals. Now we're going to check if our states, we're going to click on the first state and we want to see if that's equal to K1, but you'll notice it's put those dollars on again. Now last time we flicked this over to a relative reference, but this time we need to do something different. As it goes down evaluating the states, we do want it to change, but as it goes across, we need it to keep referring back to column B. So we're going to press our F4 function key twice, so we still have the dollar in front of the B. We're then going to type equals and check if it's equal to K1. Now we need to add a format, so let's just make it blue and we'll change our font color to white. We're then going to say OK and OK. And ACT's data is highlighting. If I come to K1 and change that to Northern Territories, that's working, but you'll notice that the new format is actually covering up the bottom 5. Now we can change this. So if we click into our data, come back to conditional formatting and come to manage rules, from here you can delete or edit existing rules. As we add new ones, they're added to the top of the list and these are given priority over rules lower in the list, but we can change the sequence. So I'm going to click on bottom 5, move it up, say OK, and we can now see our bottom 5 rule. So that was the conditional formatting taken care of. Now, how do we link up our map to our drop-down list? What we're going to do is we're going to record a simple macro where we record ourselves typing the value ACT into K1. You then have the option to link any graphical object to a macro. So we're going to take the shape covering the ACT region and we're going to hook that up to our ACT macro. Before we can record the macro though, there are two important things we need to do. The first one is save our workbook as a macro-enabled workbook because normal Excel spreadsheets do not support macros. So we're going to come to File, we're going to click Save As, and we're going to change this from an Excel workbook to an Excel macro-enabled workbook. And we're going to click Save. The second thing we have to do is show our Developer tab in the ribbon. It doesn't show by default, so if you haven't used it before, come to your File tab, come down to Options, come to Customize Ribbon, and put a tick next to Developer, and then just say OK. The Developer tab should now appear, and we're going to click on that. The first group in the Developer tab is called the Code group, and this gives us all the tools we need for recording, editing, and running macros. Before we hit the Record button, though, we're just going to make sure that we're clicked away from K1, because the first thing we want to record ourselves doing is clicking onto K1. So do that and then click Record Macro. Now we have to give our macro a name that's unique within the workbook. I'm going to call it ACT. And then you have the option of giving it a keyboard shortcut, but Control A through Z are all already accounted for. So if you hold your Shift key down, you can use the keyboard shortcut Control Shift A. We're then going to say OK. And now anything we do is going to be recorded. We're going to start by clicking into K1. We're going to type ACT, don't use the drop down, and then click to wherever you want the active cell to be when the macro finishes running. So I'm going to click on B4. And now, really important, you must stop the recording. All right, let's do another one. So I'm going to click Record Macro. This time I'm going to call it NSW. I'm going to make my keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-N. Just hold the Shift, not the Control, and say OK. And now I'm going to click into K1 and I'm going to type NSW and again click away and press Stop Recording. Let's test that those macros are working. So we're going to press Control-Shift-A. Yep, that worked beautifully. And now Control-Shift-N. Fantastic. So really easy to create a recorded macro. Be quite good to see what these macros look like. So we're going to come up to our code group and click on the Macros button. And this dialog will allow you to run the macro if you don't have a keyboard shortcut. You can delete it if you've made a mistake and just start again, or you can edit the macro. We're going to click Edit. Welcome to the VBA editor. The code we're looking at is Visual Basic for Applications, and this is the code that our macros are written in Excel. At first glance, it might look a little foreign, but we're just going to take a moment to break it down. All recorded macros begin with the word sub and end with end sub. Make sure any code you want to run appears between those two and that you don't delete them. The stuff in green is what we call a comment. It's going to be ignored by the compiler, so it's not actually going to run, but it's useful for giving information about the macro, like who wrote it or when it was changed. If I wanted to remove a line of code, I could just put an apostrophe and you'll see that comments it out. And if I remove the apostrophe, it's back. Getting into the code itself, range K1.select, well, we can work out what that's doing. It's selecting the cell K1. We're then changing the value in the active cell to be ACT, and then we're selecting B4. So not easy to write from scratch, but very easy to understand and very easy to change. So rather than going and recording my other 6 macros, I can just copy-paste this and edit it. I'm going to select the macro for New South Wales, Control-C, click underneath the N sub and paste. Now all I need to do is replace all the NSWs with another state. So I'm going to go for Western Australia. Don't have a keyboard shortcut, so I'll remove that. And then very important, make sure that the active cell is changed to WA. Now to get back into our workbook to check this, you could close this window, or great keyboard shortcut, Alt F11 toggles you between the spreadsheet and your code. All right, we're going to test the WA macro, but we want to now test it by clicking in the map. So we're going to come to the circle, which is a shape just over the WA territory, and shapes are brilliant. And you can hook your macro up to any graphical object, but shapes are a very versatile option. So I'm going to right click on that shape and I'm going to come to Assign Macro and I'm going to choose WA and then say OK. And now let's repeat that for the other 2 we've set up. So I'm going to come to New South Wales, Assign Macro, and ACT. Now let's go and test them. So as I hover over the WA shape, I get that little hand icon, and when I click on it, that's worked fantastically. Same for New South Wales, and same for ACT. So we've seen how using a simple recorded macro, we can add some fantastic interactive features to our visualizations and our worksheets. For your optional homework, try finishing off the rest of the macros and hooking them all up to the map so it works nicely.